DJs, do you know how to properly set up an analog external mixer? I know I love to read instruction manuals, but do you? If the answer to that question is no, then this video is absolutely perfect for you. Today, I'm going to show you how to properly set up an analog external mixer, and I'll be using a Mackie ProFX10v3 as an example. We're going to set this mixer up for DJ use, so let's get into it. Some mixers are a little more complicated than others, but at the end of the day, they're all exactly the same. They have inputs and outputs, and how you use them really matters. The mixer I chose to use as an example today is the Mackie ProFX10v3. It's an analog mixer, and the reason why I chose to go with an analog mixer is because more DJs are using some type of analog external mixer. Whether it's a small one or a big one, most people are using analog mixers, and I plan on doing a video in the future of how to properly set up a digital mixer. With that said, let's take a look at this thing. Before we get into how to connect this thing, I'm gonna go over the things that each channel has in common, starting with the 3-band EQ. Every channel has a 3-band EQ. The master output does not have an EQ.
Whack.
Therefore, any adjustments have to be made on a channel-by-channel basis. Each channel on this mixer also has a control for sending effects. So if you wanted to do something like add a little reverb to your microphone, but you don't want it to mess with your DJ output, you could totally do that by just turning up the effects volume on that particular channel. Next, every channel has the ability to pan left or right. I don't know why you would want to pan left or right. I'm sure somebody out there has a good reason for it. I never did, so I never used the pan. But if you need it, each channel has a pan adjustment. Next, every channel on this mixer has a mute button, including the master output. I personally use the mute button during toasts. That way I can mute the mic in between toasts. You don't hear any of that weird background noise or chatter. But there's a million reasons to mute a channel. Each channel has the ability to mute, and that's a beautiful thing. Lastly, each channel has its own independent volume control. On the volume control, you're gonna see a U. That U is the 0 point on this mixer. This is what you're gonna use to set your gains. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch this video right here where I go over everything you need to know about gains. Now let's start to look at our inputs. Starting with channels 1, 2, 3, and 4. The one thing you're gonna notice about these channels is they are specifically made to run microphones. You can tell because they have specific mic adjustments on each channel. Channels 1 and 2 have a combination XLR 1/4-inch port that's capable of doing high Z, so if you wanted to use something like a condenser mic, you can do so using channels 1 or 2. Channels 1 and 2 also have a compressor built in. Now, I've personally never needed to use the compressor because I've never had anybody speak that loud using my microphones, but in the event that you need a compressor, channels 1 and 2 have it. Channels 1 and 2 have single 1/4-inch inputs for instruments. Every single mic channel has a low cut frequency button, which is super important to have for microphones because you don't want to get that bass feedback, as well as a separate microphone gain adjustment so you could properly gain stage your mics and make sure you're getting a good clean signal. Channels 3 and 4 also have stereo 1/4-inch inputs that you can use for instruments. And technically you could use this for your DJ mixer. I just personally wouldn't because I don't want to put something on a mic channel that's not a microphone. I'd rather just have all 4 of those channels open and available for microphones. But do what you want, it's your mixer. Like I said, when I was using this mixer, I never put anything on channels 1 through 4 that wasn't a microphone, especially on channels 1 and 2. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of DJs making is using 2 channels that have XLR inputs for their DJ mixer. Now, the issue with this is you're running 2 separate channels for 1 input, which means that if you need to adjust the volume, you need to adjust the volume on both channels and make sure that you're good enough to adjust them at the exact same volume.
Why?
Second, these inputs were really made for microphones. There's other inputs on this mixer where you can run your DJ mixer, so why bother using a perfectly good microphone input when you can use another input that's actually made to have a DJ mixer plugged into it?
Duh.
Also, why use 2 channels when you can just use 1 and have more available channels? It just doesn't make any sense to me. But if you were really hard pressed and you had to run an XLR cable to your external mixer, I guess the best way to do it is to use a Y cable where you can combine your stereo output from your DJ mixer into a mono input for the external mixer, but then you're running your sound at just mono, which is fine for people like me because I run sound as mono anyway, But if you wanted stereo signal, you couldn't accomplish it like that. And like I said, do you really want to use 2 channel inputs? So I would really avoid using channels 1 through 4 for anything other than microphones. If you were wondering where you could plug your DJ mixer into, well, we'll talk about that right now. The next inputs we're going to talk about are channels 5, 6, 7, and 8. Channels 5, 6, 7, and 8 are stereo 1/4 inch inputs. This is perfect to run your DJ mixer. Now I can hear people saying, I don't want to use 1/4 inch inputs for my mixer. And I get it, like, you want to use XLR. The way I got around this was I bought 1/4 inch to XLR converters. That way I could run XLR all the way up to the external mixer and then convert it at the end. I made sure they were balanced and I never had an issue. I personally use channels 7 and 8 on the mixer for my DJ inputs because I just want a little gap between my microphone channels and my DJ input channel. But that's just personal preference. You can use either 5, 6, 7, or 8. It doesn't really matter. Just use one of these 2 stereo inputs. Leave those microphone ports alone. The next input we're going to talk about is channels 9 and 10. Now, channels 9 and 10 are arguably my favorite inputs on this mixer. I call this the oh shit channel. Oh shit! This is where you'll plug in your backup laptop or tablet into this mixer. It has a 3.5mm input, which means it's a simple headphone jack. You run a headphone cable from your iPad to the mixer. Boom, you've got a backup that completely bypasses everything at the front of the house. Just in case something really bad happens, you can get behind your setup, get to your mixer, and run a backup iPad with no issues. You can also connect a laptop using a headphone cable as well. Now, the cool thing about this input is it's switchable between the 3.5mm jack and the USB port that's on the back of this thing. What that means is you can plug a USB directly into a laptop and use that laptop as a backup source, which is awesome. More backup. Who doesn't love backup? I love backup. Backup is my favorite. You can also use that USB to send audio out to a laptop, just in case you wanted to record your set, or if you're a DJ that likes to stream online, like on Twitch and stuff, that is a really good way to get all of your inputs, like your microphones, your DJ mixer, and anything else, routed into one single output that you can stream with using OBS or Ecamm or whatever you're using that day. The oh shit input, aka channels 9 and 10, like I said, is my absolute favorite input on this mixer because who doesn't love backup? Now that we know how to connect our inputs, we're going to talk about outputs. And one of the things you're going to notice about this mixer is it has 2 main outputs. One is a stereo XLR, one is a stereo 1/4 inch. Now, what you don't know, unless you read the owner's manual of this particular mixer, is that the stereo 1/4 inch outputs actually run 6 decibels quieter than the XLR output. With that said, this is how I set up my outputs when I use this mixer. I connected the XLR outputs to my speakers. I then got a stereo 1/4 inch to mono XLR Y cable and used the stereo 1/4 inch outputs as an audio signal for videographers. Because it runs 6 decibels quieter, it gave me headroom on it, so if I needed to turn up my mics, I wouldn't immediately clip their recorder because they set their gains too. So it does take some work between you and the videographer to get the proper amount of headroom, but it's easy to do and it's the best option for this second output. Then the last output we have in this mixer is a control room output. Now what makes this output special is that it has its own independent volume control, which means it's perfect to do things like run a wireless speaker or a wired satellite speaker or a monitor for yourself. Anything where you would want to have independent volume control, you can attach to the control room output. I personally ran a stereo 1/4 inch to mono XLR adapter so I could have an XLR out for my monitor or satellite speaker, but you could also just use the 1/4 inch out, so it doesn't really matter. Either way, this output is great, like I said, for wireless speakers or a monitor. Let's recap. Channels 1 through 4 are for mics and instruments only. That's it. Channels 5 and 6, 7 and 8 are great to plug your DJ mixer into. Channel 9 and 10, aka the oh shit channel, is perfect for attaching a backup device, or you can use the USB for streaming. XLR outputs, go to your speakers. 1/4 inch main outputs, go to your videographer. The control room output goes to your monitor or satellite speaker. Also, don't be afraid to run cables like Y adapters or 1/4 inch to XLR converters. They're perfectly safe and they're perfectly fine as long as you spend the money on the good ones. Don't buy cheap adapters. Don't buy cheap Y cables. Buy the good stuff. Although I'm using this Mackie as an example, this is really good advice for any analog mixer. If this video has swayed you to buy an external mixer, keep in mind that the amount of money you invest in an external mixer directly reflects the amount of inputs and outputs and capabilities that that mixer has. It's completely up to you to know how many inputs and outputs you need to properly run your show. But regardless of what brand of mixer you get or how many inputs or outputs it has, the advice I give in this video is pretty solid for just about any analog external mixer. If you made it to the end of this video, I'd like to say thank you so much for watching. If you found anything helpful in this video, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. I have plenty of videos on my channel where I go over the technology that we use every day as DJs, with a lot more coming down the pipeline in the future. Again, thank you for watching. My name's Seth, aka DJ Seth V. This is DJ Tech Tips, and we out.